endlessly searching for an original soul.
Welcome back to Nino Hakoniwa, Dollhouse of Offerings. Kyaru took a sip of his tea. It was later the same night, and he was seated in a corner of the kitchen raised area. Meanwhile, Zugen and Shiki were sitting around the hearth just a few feet away. The women, Kyoko and Yukiko, were at the sink doing dishes. I guess we're going to visit House Kazooie tomorrow. As in Banjo-Kazooie. I'm just going to make the jokes if I can. Kyaru was observing the room around him, but he wasn't looking at anything in particular. His mind was mostly empty, as was usually the case. His teachers in House Yusaka taught him not to think more than necessary. After all, he was a tool, and tools had no need to think. Even in House Shiki, he considered it his purpose to be used, even if he was ostensibly being adopted as a fiancé for their first daughter. Still, he couldn't help but notice the ways they didn't treat him as a tool. I need to make sure I don't cause any problems for Kyoko. Just the fact of him being a Yusaka presented certain risks. Ooh, I'm going to shrink myself. I'm alright. For example, he might break some kind of social rule and hurt House Shiki's reputation. He looked at Kyoko during dinner. His every move seemed to inspire some kind of emotional reaction in her. She had been doing that ever since the moment they first met. He couldn't fathom why, but something made her want to devote the whole of her being to show him affection. He found it difficult to know how to handle her feelings, but he didn't mind it. He liked her. After all, he was well aware that he would appear insane to any normal person, and yet she accepted him. It was the same as the rest of the House Shiki. They expected him to prove their family with hearty seed, but they took it easy on him when he failed to understand social norms and expectations. Silently, Kaoru clenched his fists. His environment was calling on him to branch out of his usual cognitive domain, and as a result, he quickly developed a sense of loyalty towards House Shiki. He wanted to understand Kyoko's love. He wanted to requite her feelings.
九郎君、何か気がかりでもあるのかな?
It was Uramichi, the head of the household. He spoke to Kaoru without looking at him.
そうですね。
For a moment, Kyaru hesitated, but then he decided it would be best to seek help if he could, given his utter ignorance.
市倉通り様に与える印象が強すぎると言われました。それを今日
He glanced at her before continuing.
最初に案内された市倉家。あそこは俺に悪印象は抱かない。そう彼女は踏んでいたのではないでしょうか。
だろうな。
悪くない選択だ。
明日以降訪問する家々には悪く受け取られるとも取れます。四季家と仲が悪いのか、八坂が嫌いなのか、あるいはその両方かもしれません。
Uramichi and Dugan chuckled wearily. That confirmed Kyaru's fears.
今朝方、道元様にも言われましたが、市倉家を訪問して通り様にお会いしたことで、各家の抱くそれらは根深いのではと思ったのです。
Kyaru thought back to the grim, impenetrable look he noticed in Taru's eyes. He could only assume people he met from the other houses would be holding on to something similar in their hearts, and not all of them would be so benevolent. Dugan was right to warn him. He would have to be careful.
無論、殺しはしません。俺に悪意を向けられるのも構いません。ただ、それによって、京子と他の家に圧力が生じるなら、あるいは もしくは我慢の範疇を超えるほど蔑まれる。指揮家を侮辱された場合、俺はどこまでやっていいのでしょうか。何も言われないのなら死なないまでやってしまいますが。
That got Uramichi to look at him for a moment. Kyaru lowered his gaze submissively.
申し訳ありません。ただ、その場で言い返しもせず引き下がり、後日道元様に取りなしていただくのでは。
父上に頼らなければ何もできない。そう思われるのも困るか。
He wasn't being critical. In fact, he was pleasantly surprised.
どうでしょうね、父上。九郎君は我が家が舐められるのが気に入らないようです。
そうかしこまるな、婿殿。むしろ良い傾向だ。気を回していただけるのはこちらとしてもありがたい。
は。
When Kyaru looked up, Dugan was propping his chin up on his elbow. He and Uramichi were giving him big smiles.
一倉家だけでそう察したのはさすがだな。気づいたのなら教えておくが、京子と九郎殿が舐められるのも、それはそれで構わないのだ。
承知の上でやらせていると。
踏み絵だ、婿殿。
Uramichi sipped his tea and sighed.
指揮家はいささか大きくなりすぎており、それがよそから見ると不快にも映る。しかし、それを表沙汰にする家は少ない。猫をかぶっていたり日和見であったりと様々だが、それを延々続けられていても困る。
俺たちへの対応でそれを浮き彫りにさせるのですね。
その通りよ。まあ、こちらの意図が伝わっておらぬグズならば、立ちは悪いがバカであろう。そんなもの、集まったところで物の数ではない。それに婿殿。
Kyaru tilted his head, curious why Dugan sounded so inquisitive.
その体、踏まれて壊れるほどやわではあるまい？
はい。間違いなく。
そうだろう、そうだろう。
Kyaru watched Dugan nod with satisfaction. He was puzzled. It was as though he hadn't heard his question about where he should draw the line on how strongly he respond to hostility.
失望するな、九郎君。父上は君が思うほど薄情ではない。京子を思ってのことならば、なおさらだ。
そうさな。
Dugan paused, looking pensive. When he spoke again, he lowered his voice.
目に余るなら、女には傷を刻んでしまえ。男には傷を残すな。子息子女ならそれでよい。だが、今の当主どもには我慢せよ。そちらはわしが話をつける。よい。
The men were likely to bear a grudge, but the women would probably get over it if he hurt them. Kyaru assumed that Dugan's reasoning anyway.
承知いたしました。ご厚情に感謝します。
We're about to do something dumb, aren't we?
早くも婿殿の成長が見られて何よりだ。
それに、孫の顔が見られるのも早いかもしれないな。
Dugan and Uramichi grinned at each other. Their smiles were full of warmth in the way they hadn't been before.
おじいさま、父上、何を話されているのですか？九郎さんが私を思っていると聞こえましたが、まことですか？九郎さんがそうおっしゃったのですか？
This girl would be crazy.
落ち着け、京子。九郎君は寡黙で口下手な男だ。軽々にそんなことを言うはずがないだろう。
Uramichi chuckled with a hint of exasperation at Kyoko, who had dried her hands and hurried over to the hearth where they were seated.
いいえ、そんなことはありません。私と二人だけの時はたくさん
仲睦まじいのは良きことだな。
あらあらまあ。
Kyoko covered her mouth and giggled. She had followed Kyoko over to the hearth.
この京子と一緒にいるのを衆目にさらし続けてよいのでしょうか。
離れませんし、改めませんよ。でも、もしかして、煩わしかったでしょうか。それでも、離れるのは、嫌です。ごめんなさい。
俺は歓迎だけど、周りが。
そんな、クロウさんが喜んで迎えてくださるなら、もう周りなんてどうでもいいのに。
良いぞ。
ほら、おじいさまも喜んでくださっています。クロウさん、気兼ねなく、たくさんしましょう。村の者たちにも、八坂を利用するための婿入りだなんて言わせないよう、分かってもらわなければいけないんですよ。
そうなのか。
はい、いけないんです。
Kyoko had stepped up and sat next to Kiaru. Now she was looking at him intensely and shuffling close. Seeing how the young man responded to his daughter's advances, Yorimichi sighed.
九郎君、重ね重ねよろしく頼むよ。
よろしくお願いします。
こちらこそ。
Kiaru nodded obligingly, and then Kyoko threw herself all over him. Damn. Right in front of everyone. You're gonna do this really right in front of grandfather? The next afternoon at the house, Kiazu estate. Yukio, head of the household, was sitting silently in the tatami room. Every once in a while, he would look around to make sure everything was in order for his guests. Inside, however, he was full of resentment. Damn it, Dugan. I know you just want to rub it in my face. He wasn't happy about Shiki Kyoko's engagement to Yasaka Kiaru.
あらあら、そんなにイライラしていては体にもよくありませんよ。
You guys are rather modern looking.
そう見えるか。
いいえ、ですがわかりますもの。
Yukio gave an amused snort and flashed his wife his trademark smile. I need them to walk away believing I'll continue to be obedient to House Shiki. I can't have them figuring out what I'm up to. That's how Yukio dealt with House Shiki. He was obedient, and insofar as that was all that was asked of him, it was sincere obedience. There's always trying to get in my way. I don't understand people who think like that, nor do I want to. The resentment would only continue to build up more and more as he thought about Shiki Dugan. So he turned his thoughts to Moriko instead, his wife, who was there beside him.
上機嫌だな。
そうですとも。京子様に八坂の婿殿、どちらも健康でしょうね。
Okay, so they're the doctors.
健やかに。それが何よりです。
お前はそれでいいだろうが。
それ以外に何かありますか？健康第一、長寿が何より。私たちの望みも職責もそこでしょう。
確かにそうだ。
Oh. Yukio nodded obligingly. He wasn't particularly concerned with what she had to say, bitch. Man, you're a dick, dude. In their 40 years of marriage, her kindly demeanor and dedication to her medical practices had never changed. Healthcare, that's what we do. The Kazuyu had been Nanawara Island doctors for as long as anyone could remember. They were the only option for anyone on the island who got sick or hurt. That meant the lives of everyone in the village were on House Kazuyo's shoulders. Dugan couldn't possibly understand the responsibility we bear. He doesn't think we deserve his respect. We help all kinds of people live longer, even if only by a little bit. He doesn't have any idea how important that is or how difficult. Yukio's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps coming from the hall. He could tell who they belonged to.
父上、防腐剤の在庫がもうないんだけど。僕らの内臓が腐っちゃうから早く補充してよ。
It was Koichi and his twin brother, Kaoji, here to hassle him. They smelled of antiseptic chemicals and gore. Yukio chose his words carefully and tried not to let any emotion show on his face.
手配しておくからおとなしくしていろ。
いつ来るの？間に合わないと困るよ。それに検体も切れてるし。研究が滞っちゃうね。
Oh, Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Moriko smiled at the boys as they begged their father.
二人とも頑張ってるものね。さあ、また成果を見せてちょうだい。
あ、いや。母上も好きだよね。
ええ、あなたたちの実験はいつも面白くて発展的だもの。
Moriko placed a hand on the back of each boy and led them away, back toward the basement laboratory.
頼んだぞ。
ええ、そちらもよしなに。
Yukio let out a deep sigh when the three of them were gone. God damn. But what he was upset about wasn't his son's lax attitude towards such an important visit, nor their lack of respect. Oh, I hate how Shiki. They don't know the first thing about healthcare, those uncultured apes. I'm sorry, we saw your sons. Don't talk about uncultured apes. That was what really got to him. House Kazui performed experimental therapies using volunteers from the village and tissue samples donated from the mainland. We do it for our patients. We've got to develop new drugs, better surgical techniques. Our research can save lives. Yet, House Shiki was using their authority and connections to block House Kazui's access to new volunteers and donations. Now they were struggling just to procure the chemicals needed to preserve their patients. We could never get away with openly defying House Shiki. Uramichi's next in line, but there will be no convincing him. I'll have to get on their new heir's good side, so he'll cut us some slack.
だが。
Intellectually, he knew it was the only way, but it hardly seemed easy.
旦那様、四季家のお二人が参られました。
通せ。
He left it at that and returned to his thoughts. Today, I just get the introductions out of the way and see what I can learn about the Shiki girl's fiancé. There's no reason for me to say anything untowardly. Adjusting his posture, he repeated his plan to himself as he would remember. Soon enough, his guest appeared.
失礼いたします。
おお、京子様、お久しぶりです。
Yukio had a smile on his face, but internally he was taken aback. Is this really Shiki Kyoko? What happened to her? I don't remember performing a lobotomy. She was like a different person altogether. In the past, she had always come across as a mercilessly and cunning aristocrat. But now?
はい。この度、夫を迎えることになりまして、そのご挨拶に伺いました。
Okay, so now we know she's acting different completely.
ご丁寧にありがとうございます。妻と子供たちが同席できず申し訳ありません。
いいえ、予定を空けていただいたのは私どもですから、どうぞお気になさらないでください。
Her manner of speaking and conducting herself were the same as ever, but he could feel that something about her had changed. She kept playing with her hair. Clearly, she was a bitch in heat. You're not wrong, bro. Of course, you could say she was in love if you wanted to be sentimental about it, but Yukio was a man of science. He had studied many a live specimen just like her in his time, so he could have infer a lot from what he saw. She must be ovulating near constantly. What kind of drugs do they have her on? Kyoko ignored the way Yukio was staring at her and went on introducing Kiaru, who had followed her into the room.
こちらが八坂から婿入りのために来ていただいたクロウさんです。
Yukio fell speechless when he saw the young man. Yasaka Karu proceeded towards the cushion that had been prepared for him and sat down. Assuming a formal posture, he bowed, nearly pressing his forehead to the ground.
はじめまして、和井様。八坂九郎と申します。
Kyoko gave a polite bow as well.
夫ともども、今後ともよろしくお願いいたします。
Huh?
こちらこそ懇意にしていただければ幸いです。
Even as he fumbled to respond, the smile plastered over Yukio's face never wavered, but instead he was reeling. What in God's name? Is he even human? He couldn't help but tremble with excitement as he looked at Kiaru over. His cock strained against his pants, ready to ejaculate at the slightest hint of stimulation. What the fuck am I? What? Okay. I wasn't expecting that entire line of words. He's human, all right. Superhuman. It wasn't that Kiaru was especially attractive, at least by conventional standards. But any man with a seed of a biologist in him could see it. Kiaru represented the pinnacle of human physical attainment. His strong bones, firm muscles, surely even his internal organs were finely shaped and pumped with rare vigor. I've never seen anything like it. Yukio had never believed in gods or Buddhas, but divine was the only word that would suffice to describe the perfection of Kiaru's body. He was cut like a statue of a fierce deity standing guard at the temple gate.
和井様。
Yukio's heart was pounding in his chest, but he was determined not to let any emotion show through his mask.
京子様、素晴らしい婿殿をお取りになりましたね。
お褒めいただき光栄です。本当に素晴らしいです。
私も京子さんにそう言っていただけるのは夢のようです。
Go back, what were we talking about before? Can they see it sticking through your pants? A thrill ran down Kyoko's spine. She shivered with delight. She bit her lip, looking like she was struggling to control herself.
おやおや、見せつけられてしまいましたな。
I got to examine him, learn his family's medical history, run tests, open his skull, dissect him. I need it! 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 Alright. But Yukio didn't let so much as a hint show how he really felt show through.
我が和井家は代々医療に携わっております。季節の変わり目など体調を崩された折には何なりとご相談ください。
Fuck that. I want to look now. Now. Let me at that body. It's an insult to medical science that my hands aren't already inside his guts. He's gonna get fucked.
もっとも京子様がご解任されるのが先なように思われますが。
ええ、おそらくそうなると思われます。祖父の道元にもそう望まれていますし。九郎さんも乗り気です。結婚前だというのにはらませると言ってくださいました。
京子、ちょっと。
あら、お医者様の前ですよ。照れなくていいんですよ、九郎さん。それとも間違ったことを言いましたか？
いや、そのままだ。
和井様、そういうことなのです。
You have two horny bitches in the room.
おやおや、これは。
A baby? His baby? I've gotta have it. I'll deliver it. All I have to do is make it seem like a stillbirth. Bro.
ぜひご協力させていただきたく。
Yukio bowed courteously, hiding his erection and struggling not to come in his pants. Okay! righty, bro. I think they see it too.
父上
Not around the kid. A voice came from the small figure who had appeared from the doorway. Kyo gasped, returning to his senses all at once. He looked up to see his youngest child, a girl, staring at Kyaru and Kyoko.
小雪下がりなさい。
すごいすごい。お兄ちゃん誰？人間なの？
小雪。
だって父上、この人は私の旦那様よ、小雪ちゃん。京子ちゃんも？ええ、私の。
He wants out of here. Kyaru clearly didn't quite know what to make of Kyoko and Kyoki's exchange. Oh no, I need Kyoki to keep her big mouth shut.
そうなんだ。
Kyoki was looking Kyaru over intently. It seemed harmless enough, but something in her eyes suggested that she was studying him like an animal, an unfamiliar and fascinating insect. She wasn't old enough to understand that she should hide it when she did that. I hate to air our dirty laundry in front of the Shiki, but I've got no choice but to shut her up and chase her out of here.
和井様？
Just as Yukio moved to stand, Kyoko extended her hand and motioned for him to sit back down. Her flirtatious demeanor had vanished. Now she was back to the Kyoko he knew.
欲しいな。ねえ、京子ちゃん、この人ちょうど。私のだから、取っちゃダメですよ。はーい。
Kyoki must have been able to sense Kyoko's intensity as she moved to her father's side. She sat in his lap and wiggled happily.
末娘が失礼いたしました。
いえいえ、分かっていただけたようですから構いませんよ。
そうですね。
Yasaka Karu was still. He merely observed the room, present yet somehow removed from it all. My God. Yukio had gone quiet. He held Kyoki's hands as he thought to maintain his composure. Look at what Yasaka had achieved. Suppressing the thoughts, he tried to keep the conversation going in hopes that he could get Kyaru to take a liking to him, even just a little bit.
九郎殿は八坂の生まれでしょう。あちらでもいろいろと人体に関わることを行っていると聞きました。
そうですね。私の羊もそれゆえのものですし。
Yukio's heart was filled with jealousy in an instant.
医療とつながるものもあると思います。少しお話を伺わせていただいても。
私の知る範囲でしたら。
Yasaka Kyaru. He was being so pleasant. Yasaka. He was a Yasaka.
ありがとうございます。では、
He was the product of House Yasaka's most advanced research. Why were they allowed to do whatever they wanted, yet House Kazu couldn't do a single experiment without interference from House Shiki? Ugh. Yukio concealed his outrage and began his questioning. Meanwhile, in his lap, Kyoki was staring at Kyaru with eyes as big as marbles. That's where we're going to leave it for today. So thank you guys for joining me. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this series, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.